Director of Center for Science and Environment, Ms. Sunita Narayan, Mr. Chandrabhushan, Uma Shankar, Mr. Arun Mehra, Ms. Caitlin Wiesen, and friends. We have a saying in Tamil that loosely translated says that it is the mridangam which gets beaten on both sides. And I very much feel like a mridangam standing in front of you today, because normally I'm standing in places where I'm told how environment is actually the single reason why the country has not progressed at all, and that we stand in the path of all development. And now Sunita and Chandrabhushan and Uma Shankar are telling me why and how we are not doing enough. But I would have to say that I am on the side of the angels. I am the environment minister, and it is my personal commitment and the commitment of this government to ensure that our environment is protected at all costs. And that is what I want to share with you as my very first remark. Steel is a very, very, very important part of our economy, as all of us, as all the previous speakers have pointed out. And although our domestic production of steel is more than 72 million tons per annum, and we're the fourth largest producer of crude steel and the largest producer of sponge iron in the world, our per capita steel consumption is still really low. It's only 55 kilograms as compared to the world average of over 200 kilograms. The growth of steel consumption, therefore, we are looking at a huge spurt, I think, in the growth of steel consumption in the short to medium term because of increase in infrastructure, investment, growth in the manufacturing sector, construction activities, including government schemes like Bharat Nirman, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Indira Awas Yojana, and so on. And therefore, we're looking at a domestic steel production capacity which is projected to go up to 140 million tons per annum by the 12th five-year plan. But Mr. Mehra will, I'm sure, tell you more about that. What concerns me is, therefore, that the impact on the environment of steel is something that is absolutely phenomenal, that we really need to look at very, very seriously. And to that extent, when I looked at the specific energy consumption by the domestic steel industry, I found very, very surprisingly to me that it had declined by more than 15% in the last 10 years, but it's still much higher, as was pointed out by Chandrabhushan, than international norms, which are 4.5 to 5.5 gigacalories per ton of crude steel. But with the adoption of better technologies, beneficiation of raw material, and the use of high-grade coking coal, Indian steel plants have been able to achieve energy consumption at the level of about 6.5 to 7 gigacalories per ton of crude steel. The CO2 equivalent emissions from iron and steel industry account for about 23%, but I think Chandrabhushan projected a much higher emission in the years to come. My figures show 23% of the total CO2 emissions from manufacturing industries in India. And according to me, the barriers in implementing energy efficiency technologies include the industry's focus on reducing capital cost rather than being concerned about energy input, difficulty in acquisition of energy efficient technologies, the low rate of recycling. The integrated iron and steel plants also fall under the 17 categories of the most highly polluting industries identified by the Central Pollution Control Board. And we all are aware, painfully, that the manufacturing process creates significant air, water, solid and noise pollution. The mining of raw materials and high energy demands of steel making also contribute. And although the emission and effluent standards for the integrated iron and the sponge iron plants have been notified, the guidelines for pollution prevention for sponge iron plants have been brought out by CPCB. Industry-specific action points have also been identified under corporate responsibility for environment protection for voluntary compliance, and implementation of these action points is being monitored by the national level task force These action points include rebuilding of at least 40% of coke oven batteries, 100% utilization of slag, installation of continuous stack and ambient air monitoring systems, and so on. But we're all aware that they are at very different stages and rather unsatisfactory stages of implementation. And so I would urge upon senior leaders of the industry present here to focus on life cycle assessment to determine the overall environment impact of steel production with a view to increasing energy efficiency, increasing recycling, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and to adopt best available technologies in various processes such as coke making, sintering, casting, rolling, and so on. Now, MOEF has partly supported the entire team for the tremendous job that they've done over 2 years. I think it's immensely valuable documentation, and the 150 parameters, it's not a simple thing to evaluate based on 150 parameters, and that to evaluate in reasonably hostile conditions. And I therefore would like to offer my sincere congratulations to Center for Science and Environment for this tremendous public initiative. It is nothing less than a public initiative. And MOEF has supported this project because we believe that public disclosure, as Sunita has mentioned several times, is a critical element for better management of the environment. It's the common goods. It is the atmosphere, it belongs to all of us, and therefore public disclosure is the critical, and it's a very critical component of better environment management. And public disclosure builds an environment of credible action and will drive improvements across industries, and this has been the experience of CSE, that this public disclosure helped the companies also to move forward, the industry to also move forward in deciding what they needed to do to improve their performance. This doesn't mean that we will not strengthen our regulatory institutions. I'm very clear that we need greatly to strengthen and focus not only our regulatory systems, but also our systems of monitoring, which are not satisfactory. We are currently working with the Planning Commission on discussions for the 12th five-year plan, and we've said clearly, we've discussed with the Planning Commission that we want to focus on strengthening the institutional framework for environmental governance. And we hope that in the next plan and in the immediate future, we will see much more effective and accountable regulatory institutions. This study raises very, very important issues. And I, as Minister, am seriously concerned about the issues which have been raised. Industrial growth must not, cannot come at the cost of the environment, because then we have to evaluate what this growth means to us as a country, means to our future, what will we have left in the future. It's clear, as I said in my opening remark, and I say to everybody, it's very clear that industrial output must grow. We must have economic growth. The steel industry, for the reasons I mentioned before, can and must expand. But the question is, if the growth happens in the way in which the industry is operating today, then clearly we have a problem. We know that the degradation of environment is not sustainable. But beyond that, today, in an atmosphere where this government is encouraged, where people themselves, where organizations like CSE work, and where the common man is very, very aware of, and woman, of his and her right. I get in the email every day hundreds of complaints from ordinary citizens about pollution in their neighborhoods. So it's very, very clear that the degradation of environment will lead to tensions with local communities and will also destroy our life support systems. This, friends, is simply not acceptable. And therefore, if industry must grow, and it should grow, industry must demonstrate that it can be responsible with environmental management. It must be able to go that extra mile in performance. What interested me very much in this study is finding, and Sunita ji explained it really well, what interested me very much is that the better performing companies are those that are being pushed by sheer economics to improve their efficiencies. So green business is good business. And this is clearly one part of the challenge that we have in India. We are a resource-rich country, but we have huge needs to meet. We also know that we have conflicts over the use of natural resources. And I make this point, I believe that this point is central to what I would like to share with you today. Our natural resources must be managed in a way that will best benefit the poor first. It has to benefit the poor and the needy. And therefore, we cannot afford to be complacent about the efficient use of resources from minerals, water, land, any resource. And the future steel industry, and indeed all industry, must be built on this principle of resource efficiency, because this is the key driver of sustainability. In the case of the steel sector, the more efficient you are with the use of energy, which as we well know is increasingly scarce, the less you will pollute. The more you reuse and recycle your waste, the less you will require of material and energy. The lower will be your cost, the lower will be the burden of disposal into the environment. And therefore, good resource management makes you more efficient, but also protects the environment. And this is the win-win that we must strive towards. The question I have for you, therefore, is why is it that industry is not geared to take bold and decisive steps to improve performance? What is it that we need to do? Why is it when, as an emerging country, we have the imperative of growth, but the equal imperative that the growth should be green, equitable, and sustainable? Why is it then that we slip, all of us, the government on monitoring or regulatory mechanisms and industry on maintaining those green indicators? I think we need to discuss this in great depth and understand that the drivers of change that will bring about the shifts in approach and practice are something that have to be accepted by all of us and that all of us have to be committed to. I say this particularly because I'm clear that growth in a business as usual scenario that Chandrabhushan referred to simply will not be work and cannot be sustained. We have to work together to make that future different. Tomorrow is World Environment Day. I always say we have an International Women's Day, we have, it's always for the endangered. You know, you have a day only when something is endangered. And tomorrow, we should not be having a World Environment. Every day should be Environment Day, but tomorrow is World Environment Day. And I think it's an opportunity for us to celebrate the good environment work that's being done by organizations such as Center for Science and Environment and hundreds of others who are working in the field, and to dedicate ourselves to doing much, much more to safeguard our own and the future of our children. The rating of the steel sector is a reminder to us about the difficult road that is ahead, but it's an equal reminder of what we can do, and that I find very encouraging, of what we can do if we put our minds together and if we are committed to change. The rating sets a clear roadmap for the future. This is what we are committed to ensure is fulfilled, because this is our common future. Thank you very much.